All right, so welcome everybody to our chat here about Rocky. My friend Lloyd in Australia, I'm here from Korea. We're going to talk about probably one of the most epic film series of all time. We're going to go into our two top picks and our bottom pick. And just to set some of the rules, this isn't really like a review per se. We're not going to give it like thumbs up, thumbs down, or stars. And we're going to exclude Rocky Balboa and the Creed films. Not that they're not great films in their own right, but the core of the series really happens between 1 and 5, in our opinion. All right, Lloyd. So what was your first introduction to the Rocky films?
It's good. It's a good question. When you asked me that, I was trying to think. So I definitely think it was 4, crazy enough, because when I was a little kid, I was like 5 when that came out. And my favorite thing to do, even at 5, was to go to the movies. Like, it was better than my parents promising me candy or anything. And the debate was between Teen Wolf and Rocky 4. But when my parents heard that Rocky 4 was violent because of Apollo Creed, that sort of news got out before. Yeah, we didn't get to go to Rocky 4. We went to Teen Wolf, which wasn't a terrible thing.
Well, look, I wouldn't even mention it to you, except that I gotta talk to someone.
Wait a minute, are you gonna tell me you're a fag? I mean, if you're gonna tell me you're a fag, I don't think I can handle it.
Oh, I'm not a fag. I'm a werewolf.
That's what sort of alerted me to Rocky 4, but I saw 3 before 4, because then we rented 3 and my brother and I wore that tape out. Like, we saw it so many times, and then 4. So that's my introduction. And later on, only when I got older did I go back to 2 and then 1. So I did it in a really messed up order.
Right.
What about yourself?
Yeah, I think I did mine in a weird order as well. I can remember being younger, and my older cousins, they would always have like a Rocky movie on here and there, and I would see bits and pieces of maybe 1 and 2, but never the whole thing. So I was aware of Rocky, but I think the first one that I actually sat down and watched the entire thing was Rocky 3 as well.
Yeah.
It was just amazing, and I was lucky enough that my dad didn't think Rocky 4 was too violent, so I did get to see that one on the big screen.
Jealous.
It was pretty awesome, and it's I kind of wish I had been old enough to see all of the original films on the big screen.
Yeah, I kind of wish I'd seen them in order now that we talk about this, because like going back to seeing 1 and seeing him lose, because he loses the first fight in Rocky 1. Actually, I was really pissed off about that as a kid. Yeah. And I was like, why is this a good movie? Like, Rocky has to win. And now, being older, obviously I realize how great that is, that he made this fantastic picture, you know, that everyone laughed at him was never going to be any good, and had that difference that he actually loses at the end is brilliant. But as a kid, you're like, no, Rocky has to win, right? That's why I always liked 3 and 4.
Yeah, Rocky's supposed to be the hero.
yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, they're just great films. And the funny thing is like, I'm not a man's man, you know. I didn't grow up like being super, what do you call that? Testosterone filled or anything. But I think it's just something with all guys that like, there is a love for Rocky. Like, there's just something about it. It's got a lot of layers to it.
Yeah, I was actually going to touch on next, like the appeal to Rocky. And I think for me, and I think I probably appreciate it more now as a grown man, but he's such a complex character. Like, he physically looks like he'd be that, you know, perfect image of male testosterone machismo, but he's sensitive, he's kind, he's loyal, he's protective. Like, he's really a well-rounded individual. And I think it's a shame that some people don't watch the movies because they think, oh, I don't like boxing movies.
Yeah, exactly. He's a meathead, you know.
Yeah, I think I'm becoming a nobody again, too.
Whose eyes? Not mine.
In mine. In here.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's so many layers to the films, actually. And like, even now, because I watch 3 and 4 a lot when I work out, because it gets me motivated.
Yeah.
And even now, like I discover new things, and I'm just like, yeah, there's this little things just snuck in there, and they're very clever films.
Yeah, and there's so many small moments, even with the supporting cast, especially in 3 and 4, that I think there's more meat added to those characters like Polly and Mickey and Adrian. Like Adrian becomes such a stronger character by 3 and 4, where she's.
I just think we need him now, don't you?
Oh, Rocky, please. You don't have to prove anything.
Just don't want it no more.
It's over because you want it to be over. I'm glad.
I do.
It's just, you've never quit anything since I've known you.
She's telling Rocky, like, you're crazy, man. What are you doing here? You're, making the wrong choices. And it's just,
She's a very strong character, absolutely. And she always stands by him no matter what.
So what are your top 2? And then tell me, of those top 2, what's your top 1?
Yeah, see, that's tough because my top 2 are 3 and 4. Not just because of the nostalgia of loving them as a kid. Again, I watch them now and I just think they're such great films. And the problem is I kind of see them as one movie. I really do. Like 3 and 4 to me are one movie, because you've got the 3 begins with him on top of the world. He's won the heavyweight title. He becomes soft. We know that. Clubber kills him in the ring. And Apollo actually teaches him for the first time out of all the movies actually how to box properly, because before that he's just a brawler. But he actually learns technique from Apollo. He learns to be light on his feet. He learns to bounce around the ring. He learns all these things. And he also learns how to train, which I think is really important. He learns how to train like a badass, going back to the bare bones of how to train, not all your fancy equipment, all this bullshit. Yeah. And then he takes all that and beats Clubber. But then in 4, you've got Apollo, and Apollo is totally forgotten how to train, and he's all about the glitz and the glamour.
Yeah.
He gets killed. And then Rocky, when he goes over to Russia, he's like in Siberian snow. He's pulling and Drago's got all the fancy equipment, and he's working out with all the fancy equipment, right? So Rocky never lets go of what Apollo really taught him, and that's what helps him win. So I just find those movies so close together. It's hard to pick a lead, but if it was by a nose, it would still be 4, just because I love all the music. I love the training montages. But it's very close. There's not much in it. So that's me.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said about it being like a one film split into 2 movies thing. I'd even go as far to say that part 2 is part of that as well. Like there's a complete trilogy of films there, because you have Rocky defeating Apollo, which humbles Apollo, which leads him to have more respect for Rocky in 3 and offer to train him after Mickey dies and so on. So, they all sort of lead into one great thing. And I think part of that is probably Stallone took over directing duties as well. So he probably had it a bit more mapped out that way. For me, though, I would have to say 3 is my top choice, probably because I think Clubber is the best opponent in the series in terms of the psychological warfare that he plays on Rocky. Like it's so brilliant. Because he's definitely bigger and stronger, but he's nowhere as big or as strong as Drago. So he knows, like, I've got to play mind games with this guy. And we chatted about this on Facebook the other day. Like, he's telling Adrian, like, hey, why don't you come over to my place and see what it's like to be with a real man? Yeah. It shoves Mickey and, probably not with the intent to ultimately kill Mickey, but that's sort of what results from that. And also it's so quintessential of everything I loved in the 80s. Like we have Mr. T from the A-Team. We had Hulk Hogan.
That's a great choice. Yeah, Hulk Hogan's Thunderlips is in it. Yeah.
The ultimate male versus the ultimate meatball.
Eye of the Tiger. Like it was just a perfect Snapchat of the 80s.
Yeah.
Like,
and we should mention that.
80s, it's that,
You should mention that quickly on Eye of the Tiger, that was not the song that Sylvester Stallone wanted for the film. He wanted You're the Best, which ended up going to Karate Kid.
Right, there was that one, and he also wanted.
He wanted Another One Bites the Dust by Queen.
And,
yeah,
and then
Queen said,
no,
you're not having that. And now, like, can you picture anything but Eye of the Tiger? Like,
no.
I tried doing that the other day, like that opening montage segment that has Eye of the Tiger all through it. I tried picturing it with Another One Bites the Dust, and I'm just like, no, it doesn't work.
No.
Another one bites the dust. Another one bites the dust.
I think my favorite scenes still come from Rocky 3 and 4, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
There's the scene on the beach. Like I mentioned, Adrian's character became more strong. Just where she confronts Rocky and she's like, you got to do it for the right reasons. You can't do it for Mickey. You can't do it for me. You can't do it for anything.
Apollo thinks you can do it. So do I. But you gotta want to do it for the right reasons. Not for the guilt over Mickey. Not for the people. Not for the title. Not for money or me. But for you. Just you alone.
To see Rocky break down and be like, I'm scared, Adrian. I'm scared.
Yeah.
Before it was just me and I had nothing to lose. Now I got everything to lose.
Yeah.
Like, that's just an amazing moment, because you don't typically see that in movies, like where guys are supposed to be this macho kind of character.
Yeah.
So
We got everything but the truth. What's the truth, damn it?
I'm afraid, all right? You want to hear me say it? You want to break me down? All right, I'm afraid. For the first time in my life, I'm afraid.
I'm afraid too. There's nothing wrong with being afraid.
There is, for me, there is.
Why, you're human, aren't you?
especially in the 80s, the 80s are so fueled with, macho heroes.
Yeah, exactly.
So that would be my pick from part 3. And one of my favorite scenes from part 4 is when Apollo's about to fight Drago, and he says he could spit nails or something like that, and Rocky's like, "Oh, I never tried those before."
It was great. I feel like I could eat nails, Stallion.
I never tried them things,
What are you talking about?
The snails, I never had them, I see them in the garden, but I never want to eat them.
I didn't say anything about snails. I said nails. Nails, Stallion.
Nails. Yeah. So it just it shows that bond that they had formed between part 3 and part 4. Like, they became brothers. They went from being, I wouldn't say bitter rivals, because Apollo's not really the typical bad guy in the first 2. He's just the boxer who wants to promote himself and have a great fight. So I thought that was really cool that they actually formed a team in part 3 and grew to be like brothers, really.
Yeah.
How about you?
Well, I love that scene you're talking about in part 3 with him and Adrian. And what's funny, like what I was saying earlier about how the 2, 3 and 4 are pretty much one movie in my mind, is then in part 4, after she gives him this great speech, she's on the stairs after she's just found out he's agreed to fight Drago, and she's saying the opposite. She's like, "You're gonna lose. This guy's gonna kill you. This is suicide." And I'm kind of there going, what the fuck, Adrian? And
because of that, Mickey ain't here no more.
You didn't push him into anything. He was a grown man and he did what he had to do. And you have no right to feel guilty for what happened. You don't. You were a champion and you did what you were expected to do. And you did what I and everybody else thought you should do.
I just want to go someplace where I ain't gonna think about nothing except him.
Rocky, give it some time. Don't do this. A lot of people live with hurt.
But now there's you, there's the kid. I don't want to lose what I got.
What do we have that can't be replaced? What? A house. We got cars. We got money. We got everything but the truth.
Adrian, a lot of people don't have a choice. I do.
And for that, you're willing to lose everything?
Adrian, this ain't everything.
Not for the guilt over Mickey. Not for the people. Not for the title. Not for money or me. But for you. Before, there were reasons to fight I could understand, but I don't understand this. Even if you win, what have you won? Apollo's still gone.
And if I lose?
And you lose. But at least you lose with no excuses. No fear. And I know you can live with that.
You can't change anything, Adrian. All we can do is just go with what we are.
You
Can't go with what you are. Have you read the papers? Do you know what everybody says? It's suicide. You've seen him. You know how strong he is. You can't win.
Adrian.
We got everything but the truth. What's that truth, damn it?
Adrian. Adrian always tells the truth.
You just gave him this big talk, like, you know, bigged him up in 3, and now you're saying, you know, he's gonna fail and he shouldn't do it, right? So she comes to her senses, and then she comes to Russia and says, you know, I'm with you no matter what. So I mean, it's good, but I just found that ironic how that sort of flips on the other one. But yeah, they're both good scenes. My favorite scene in part 3 is very subtle, actually, and I've grown to love it just as I've gotten older. In the first fight against Clubber Lang, when they meet each other, Clubber Lang says to him, "Dead meat." Dead meat. And as Rocky walks away, you can actually see Rocky's like, oh shit, like the blood drains out of his face. He's scared because he realizes he's not really prepared for this. You know, he was horse-assing around. He wasn't prepared for this. And Clubber sees that look on Rocky's face, and he's like, ha, I got it, right?
Yeah.
Then in the second fight, this is my favorite part of part 3, is he stares down Rocky again, and he says, I'm gonna bust you up. Bust you up. And Rocky's just got this concrete face, and he's just like, go for it.
Well, here we go. The war is on. We're just waiting for the
And
bell.
it's the look on Clubber's face where he's like, oh shit, like, why is he not scared of me now? Like, what the hell? He gives him a double take almost, like, this isn't the same guy that I faced off before, right? And it's only at that moment, I think, that Clubber realizes that maybe this isn't going to be as easy as he thinks. So I love that scene. That's my favorite from 3. And from 4, I just really like the training montage of how they would show. There's one in particular I really like where Drago is pushing up against, you might know the name of this gym equipment. He's pushing up against this, like they do in football, you know, in American football. He's pushing up against this battering ram almost.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to Rocky, and he's kind of doing the same thing, except he's out in the snow and he's pulling Paulie on a sleigh, you know? And so Drago's in this fancy gym doing this thing, and he's pulling Paulie on the sleigh, like through the snow. And it's like, I just love that. I just love the contrast of he's like, no, I'm going to do it the hard way. Right.
I kind of like that. And in a weird way, you just made me think of this. Like, it almost mirrors how bodybuilding had changed over the years. And a lot of the older bodybuilders be like, these machines are not doing anything for you. Like, real strength and real gains will come from doing it the old way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And like you said before, you know, Rocky keeps it basic.
Yeah. Because Apollo taught him that, right? Like, Mickey kind of taught him that. He did that originally with Mickey, but also I think the combination of that was in those earlier films, he didn't have any money, right? Yeah. And so once he became rich, it's like, well, I don't need to do that anymore because I can get the fanciest equipment there is. And Apollo kind of snapped that out of him and was like, no, that's not how it's done, right? And he takes that teaching with him. So like, I really like that. But can I mention something that really irritated me?
Sure, go.
Something that really irritated me about part 4, and now every time I watch it when I'm on the treadmill, it just irks me. They have this big Las Vegas fight between Apollo and Drago, right?
Yeah.
And when they announce Drago, the Siberian bull, the entire audience erupts in boos and heckling, right?
Gold medalist and undefeated world amateur champion from the Soviet Union, the Siberian bull, Ivan Drago.
I want you!
Now the two fighters come to the center of the ring for the instructions from referee Lou Filippo.
And nothing said by the commentators. And then in the end scene, when Rocky's in Russia and he's facing off Drago, and they announce Rocky's name, they say several times actually leading up to that, oh, listen to this hostile crowd. I've never in my life, never ever in a sporting match, ever heard such a hostile crowd.
Right now, one of the fighters starting to make his way through this crowd and toward the ring. Listen to this crowd.
We knew he wouldn't be popular, but this borders on pure hatred. Listen to this crowd. It sounds insane. It's unbelievable. I've never, in all my years of reporting, seen such a hostile crowd.
And I'm thinking in my head, really? Well, obviously you weren't fucking in Las Vegas when everyone in America booed Drago, but that's okay, right? Like, no, now it's the Russians. This is a hostile crowd. I'm like, come on.
Well, let's confess that neither one of us is American, so we can probably say that's the good old American propaganda machine right there.
It is. And, you know, it must have been hard for Sylvester Stallone in that time to fight that. Because he would have had, like, that's a Cold War movie, right? You
yeah,
can see
totally.
Background here. That's a heavy. The wall is still up at that time. You know, it's the SDI wars were going on. That was a hell of a time for Sylvester Stallone to make that movie, and for him to give that peace speech at the end, which I think is really good, and like is not insulting Russia, right?
In here, there were two guys killing each other. But I guess that's better than 20 million. That if I can change,
Я думаю, что каждый тоже изменился сегодня.
and you can change,
Вы можете измениться.
everybody can change.
Каждый может измениться.
And has the guy that's playing Gorbachev stand up and applaud him, like, you know, that's really that's saying that we're all human, we're all got the same colored blood running through our veins. So I think he did really well with that. But yeah, there are the little ones like I just mentioned where they slip it in, where it's like, you know, and Apollo says like, I just want the world to know that Russia doesn't have all the best athletes. And I'm thinking, well, when have they said that, buddy? Like, that's an American thing to say, we're the best at everything, you know?
Exactly, yeah. And it really did a lot to you know, poke the bear in terms of the steroid scandal within Russian athletes as well. Like, it was very on the nose. Like, you guys are all juiced up. We know it. You know it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not.
It's interesting you should mention that, because I don't think that was necessary to show Drago getting a steroid shot. Like, I don't think that really added a lot to the film. Like, that could have been left out, and it could have been, well, Rocky did it the tough way with his training, you did it the fancy way, so maybe that's what gave him the edge.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but
you could also say it was better left implied with the team of doctors that were constantly surrounding him as well. Like, I think people could have made that logical leap anyway.
Yeah.
But to leave the bag would have been more interesting. Yeah. Like, is he juicing? Like, or even like, show a clip of Drago in a room and a doctor enters and they close the door and you don't see the needle. Like, just a little bit. But yeah, it's hard to sort of, not hard, but when I look back on the Rocky series, like, I think number one from a technical standpoint is probably the best, but I can't choose it as my favorite because when I think Rocky, I think 3 and 4. I don't know if it's because it's the first two that I saw. Like,
exactly. It might be our age bracket.
Yeah. But like, just nothing gets your blood going and your heart pumping the way those two do. Like, it's just, and I think most people,
the story of how the first one was made, I mean, will never be beaten. You know, you got a 23-year-old kid who wanted to play the lead role in this script that he wrote. Everyone in Hollywood was laughing at him, you know, like, basically, you're a joke, kid. Like, and the ones that took him serious on the script, that thought, hey, this could work and it's not going to cost us much money, which is always a factor. They're like, yeah, but you're not acting in it. Like, they had Ryan O'Neal lined up for that role. I mean, are you fucking kidding me?
They had
Ryan O'Neal,
Sylvester Stallone lined up for that film. All right, well, let's before we get away with it, let's talk about our least favorite film in the series, which I think we both agree on again. Part 5.
It's the elephant in the room.
It's totally the elephant in the room. I watched it the other day during a workout. Oops. And that was a total Rocky moment when I kicked the camera away and I said, oops, don't you have anything tougher to say? Anyway.
Now you can take it. Whoop. Hey, can't you think of anything tougher to say than oops? Come on, Dave.
So I watched it the other day, and I will say that rewatching it, I found a lot more good moments than I had remembered being in the film. Like, I think there was a solid base there to show Rocky sort of losing everything and having to go back to the old neighborhood. I thought that
I don't mind
really
that story arc at all. I don't mind that at all.
It's not a problem with the story. It's definitely an execution problem, which is strange because they brought Avildsen back to direct this, and he directed the first one, and it went on to win like awards and all this acclaim, but it just felt really weird and awkward. And I'm trying to pinpoint exactly why, but it just seemed like there was no chemistry between the actors. Stallone felt like he was phoning in the performance half the time.
Yo, why are you still hanging around, kid? Is there something I can do for you?
Yeah, I'd like to try again.
Hey, kid, you know, I like to help you out, but I really don't know nothing about no management.
And I think maybe he was just done playing Rocky, because at that time he was seen as two things, Rocky and Rambo, and he probably wanted to break out of that. And I think it kind of came through in his performance a bit.
What have you got to lose?
Me? Nothing. I ain't got nothing. It's what you got to lose.
I got nothing to lose.
Hey, maybe you do. Like, look, what if I don't do good, right? You know, and you don't make it. I don't want you blaming me for this, kid, you know?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of weight to what you said, that he just wasn't in the mood to play Rocky, but maybe he got pressured into making another one. But he could have made another one. He just needed to wait. There's nothing wrong with the story arc of him losing everything. That's totally fine. What's wrong with that movie is, in my opinion, is it's trying to force all the themes of the other movies rather than just be those themes. Does that make sense? It
That's going to be the next
like,
point.
Yeah, like we've been running on a 10 with these themes naturally. Let's amp them up to a 20 and just force them. I really want to show in this movie the relationship with my son. And hey, isn't it cool that it's actually my son? But we're going to really amp that up and show him going to school. And like, none of this was really important. And like, it was really on the nose when he takes Tommy in, you know, the fighter, and they kept showing scenes where the son was jealous. And it's like, yeah, we get it. Like, you're hitting me over the head, like with a hammer on this. Like, just make it subtle, like the other movies, that it's like, it's not so forced, you know?
Probably the least subtle entry in all the films in the series. Like, and I agree with that. And having an actual boxer, like Tommy Morrison did an okay job, but you know, it wasn't as good as I think hiring an actor, or at least an athlete like Mr. T who could act.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of weird. And you know, it was so on the nose that Rocky's now taking over as Mickey and trying to be Mickey. And
and the Don King character.
Yeah, so over the top.
That had the catchphrase line, which is my worst part of Rocky, when he kept saying, "Touch me and I'll sue."
Touch me and I'll sue. Come on, pug. Touch me and I'll sue.
Sue me for what?
Yeah.
Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Although he has one line that does make me chuckle. Let's put some hustle behind that muscle. Like, I think that's a pretty funny and clever line about money making. And two things that really bothered me right off the hop from part 5 is that the first thing is Rocky suddenly has that golden cufflink on a chain. Like, that's not in any of the previous movies.
No.
And suddenly he's wearing it in the shower after the Russia fight.
Yeah.
And like, what the hell? And then we go back to the United States, and his son is like 5 years older than he was in part 3.
That's my dad. You know, what do you think we are, nerds?
Yeah.
And it's like, I get that he wanted to have his son in there, and that's nice and everything. And maybe he thought, well, there was a bit of a gap between part 4 and part 5, so maybe we can get away with it. But as somebody who watches movies closely, it's like,
in fairness, they did that worse between 3 and 4. If you think about it, in 3, he's like a toddler, and then they make out that 4 happens directly after 3 because he comes back to the house and he's like, Dad, where'd you get that hat?
Where'd you get that hat?
A friend gave it to me. Like it?
Who punched you in the eye?
Same friend.
That's weird.
Yeah. That's right after the secret fight with him and Apollo, right? So the kid goes from a toddler in 3 to like, he's jumped to like age at least 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. Well,
So
I think
that's
we
pretty-
could say
that's
that
bad.
both jumps are pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've always found in part 4, it's a bit ambiguous as to the time gap between that secret fight and the beginning of part 4. Because you could argue that, you know, they just continually sparred with each other and that was just
Yeah,
a
that's true.
sparring
That's true.
session.
You could do that.
But 5,
In
I
fact,
just
I
found
hope
a
that
bit
that's
more
what it was.
pronounced. Yeah, it could have been. But yeah, 5 was a bit more obvious, like, oh, we just landed from Russia. So unless you stayed in Russia for 5 years, like that kid is way too old. Now, the other thing that bothered me too, and I want to talk about music again, like our favorite songs, but the music in part 5 felt really off too. I love rap and hip hop just as much as the next guy, but the song choices felt really out of place in Rocky
Yeah,
5.
they didn't fit. They didn't fit. And again, I agree with you. That's got nothing to do with rap music because one of my other favorite boxing films, The Gladiator from 1992, that has a very hip hop soundtrack, and it works. It fits because he's on the rough, cold streets of Chicago, you know. And maybe Rocky 1 in Philadelphia, maybe that would have fitted a bit more. But this one, it doesn't fit because he's older. It doesn't go together. It almost like it feels forced. It's like, hey, what are the kids listening to these days? Let's bring them into the Rocky franchise, right? Like, let's get them into it by changing what's been working for us.
Right.
And amping it up. And directors always do this. It just bothers me, you know. Most of my favorite directors make like 3 or 4 brilliant films. And it's almost like then they start listening to the reviews and they start listening to the audience and they're like, hey, they really like this certain thing I do. So instead of just keep doing that, let's crank that up and make everything about that. And now it seems really forced, right? And it's not natural anymore. So, and I think that's the definition of 5. That's what they did.
And I think part of the issue with that too, with 5 probably is that, you know, you go back to part 1 and they're on a shoestring budget and they just like take whatever they can get kind of thing. Yeah. And by the time they get to 5, they probably have all this money. It's just like, well, let's do this then, even though they don't have to do it. Let's get this artist in to record a song. And oh my God, that Elton John song at the ending credits, what a joke.
Now you can love, now you can lose, now you can choose. That's the measure of a man.
But it seems like he had a rhyming thesaurus on his piano while he wrote the lyrics for that song. Or maybe, I guess he doesn't write the lyrics. Bernie Taupin wrote the lyrics.
Yeah, that's
probably.
right.
So it's like,
right, music.
You know, Bernie, you're capable of better if you watch this.
It's just it's such a bad film that I almost just like to jump straight to the years later. You know, the films we're not going to discuss, but like if he'd have just not done 5 and then done those, and then could have put a little backstory into the new one saying, okay, he lost all his money by a lawyer screwed him, he lost all his money. That's the only piece of 5 that we need to link Rocky 4 and Rocky Balboa, and you can mention that in the first 30 seconds. And
exactly.
Then you know, the rest of that film was it was total throwaway.
Yeah, like
it's no good.
We don't need 5. I mean, I think the elements of 5 gave birth to things that we see in Rocky Balboa and in Creed, like with Rocky becoming a trainer and taking somebody new under his wing. But yeah, it's just,
if we didn't have 5 though, you think they wouldn't have been able to pull that off?
Well, they probably could have pulled it off, but also I wonder, like, if 5 hadn't been the last thing we saw of Rocky, maybe Rocky Balboa doesn't get made. You know, maybe Rocky.
No, man, because Rocky Balboa was not really about him being a trainer. It was about him coming back for a final fight. And I know we're not going to talk about this, but It's really not linked to 5. It's linked to him being a retired boxer and wanting to come back and have one last shot, right? The Creed movies are more about him being the trainer.
Oh yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. The elements of 5 that leads into Rocky Balboa for me is that he can't fight because of all the brain injuries.
Yeah.
So that takes him away from the ring for a little while. So that's the link there that I'm making. But what I'm saying is, like, if let's say Rocky 4 was the last one that they made in the 80s.
Yeah.
And Rocky 5 doesn't get made, it's not a stinker, and Stallone has just moved on and he's happy with the rest of his career, maybe we don't get Rocky Balboa at all.
Yeah.
I think and I read an interview, like, part of him making Rocky Balboa was the fact that Rocky 5 was such a bad taste in his mouth as well, and he wanted to go out on his terms, and especially Hollywood hadn't really kept him around as much as some of the other actors from the 80s and 90s, and I think he was just like, okay, I'm going to do this. And at that time, he felt like it was kind of his swan song between that and the Rambo installment at the time. Well, but then it relaunched his career. So
it did. And you never know, like, if the fans are going to want that, right? You got to put yourself in his position. It's like, are they going to be angry if I bring out another Rocky or a Rambo? Like, it's gutsy to do that, like, so many years later, right? And it paid off for him because there's people like you and me that were like, bring it on. Like, I want it.
Exactly. And one last thing before we talk about our favorite songs about Rocky 5 that bothers the hell out of me is not having Rocky box in that movie was a huge mistake. Like, I get the storyline and I get the sort
street
of
fight was weak.
It was stupid.
It was stupid.
Like, so not to have him box is kind of like if you made a Superman movie where Superman is just Clark Kent the whole time.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't want to watch that movie. So I guess we can talk about our favorite songs across the series. Like, let's try and pick a top 3 maybe.
Okay. Well, for me, I mean, you got to put Eye of the Tiger in top 3. You got to do it. It's just such a good song. It's a good motivational song. And the other ones I really like are from 4. I love the No Easy Way Out montage. I just think that's really, really great.
There's no easy way out. There's no shortcut home. There's no easy way out. Giving in can't be wrong.
It's just a perfect song that just fits that. I'm a montage guy. Like, even when I make my little films, I love putting montages in them. I just love them, or trailers, stuff like that, right? So I love that montage. I think it really works. And yeah, third would be, it'd be a tie, actually. It'd be Burning Heart.
In the burning heart, just about to burst. There's a quest for
And what's the one by Survivor that's in 4?
in the burning heart.
Because they did another
Hearts on Fire.
Hearts on Fire is that's not theirs. That's Burning Heart. No, Burning Heart's theirs.
In the burning heart.
Burning Hearts,
So Hearts on Fire and Burning Heart. That's why I'm getting confused.
Yeah.
Those are my equal thirds because again, points in the movie where they put them really work. Like, Burning Heart is actually got in it, like East versus West, right? And it starts as he's flying into Russia. I like that. And Hearts on Fire is obviously when Adrian's joined him in Russia, and it's like, okay, now I've got my wife and I'm getting serious about the training. So yeah, those are mine.
Totally.
What are yours?
I would probably have to say I agree with your choices, and it would be hard to pick just 2 of those to be in my top 3. But for an obscure one from Rocky 3 is what's his name? What's Sly's brother's name? I'm blanking.
Frank.
Frank Stallone, right? He does this sort of stripped down slower version of Take You Back in part 3. It's just got like a little bit of a Congo in it. I'll get Connor to edit in a clip
please
of
do. Yeah, do you know what scene
Take You
that's in?
Back. I think it's when they are going to California with Creed, and it's like
I know exactly where it is.
Yeah.
It's when they first arrive in LA and Paulie's complaining about the hotel they're staying in. Oh yeah, is that Frankie? Is it?
Yeah,
it's you told me something. You told me something today. I didn't know that was Frank Stallone that did that.
Yeah, and I think Frank Stallone probably has to thank his big brother for most of the success he's had musically. Which again, Rocky reflects how Sylvester Stallone is in real life. He's a loyal guy. He's a compassionate guy. It seems like.
Yeah. He's a bit more of a diva, I think, than Rocky Balboa, but
probably. But who can blame him, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, cultural impact of the Rocky films, and do you think there's any film out of the current crop of films that could come close to, being what Rocky is? Because kids nowadays, everybody still knows who Rocky is. Like if you say Rocky, people will automatically know who that is.
Do you mean boxing film or just film in general?
Just the film in general.
Yeah, that's interesting. See, what I really like about Sylvester Stallone, probably one of the things I like about him most is he always stays relevant. So with all his films, he puts something in there that's really relevant. Like when he did the later Rambo movie, the first one in the 2000s, it was set in Burma, right? And it was really like there was a conflict there at the time, and it was really relevant. And he did that with the Rocky movies too. So it's like the Cold War, it was very relevant, and he used that in 4. So what a lot of people worry about is that that's going to date a film, but what it actually does is it does the opposite, because it targets a point that's happening in history. So people look back on that and say, no, that was happening at that time, and it makes it relevant rather than making it like that's old and dated. So I like that he does that with his films. I don't know, like these days, who's doing that? I'll probably think of something later, and it's kicking me, but I can't think of too many people that are doing like something that's relevant to society. That's that gets everyone sort of interested on so many different levels. Like you can just be a straight out jock and love these movies. I'm not that at all. I love these movies because I think they've got heart and they've got sort of a meaning behind them. It just depends. Yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
It's tough, this isn't any kind of knock against current films, but I kind of question the staying power of a lot of them, because a lot of them, you did reference, like having historical moments in the Rocky movies, like the Cold War and everything. But I feel like a lot of films nowadays are very much of the moment. And I kind of worry that in the future, people are going to look back and be like, yeah, this is totally a 2020 movie or a 2021 movie.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean to say they're not good movies. It's just kind of like, am I going to watch this in 20 years and feel the same way that I do about watching Rocky 3 or Rocky 4?
Yeah.
So it's tough to say. And, the cool thing about, like I said, Rocky 3, and I hate to gush over that movie so much, but like it impacted so much of the culture in the 80s. Like Hulk Hogan's in that movie, like I mentioned before, that's like pre-WrestleMania 1. And that sort of made him a bit more popular. That upped his stock with the WWF to bring him back in and like build the company around him. So it's kind of like, there's just so much stuff that happened after Rocky 3 in terms of 80s stuff. And anyway, it's tough. I'm thinking about the Avengers movies, and I love that series, but like in 20 years, like, are they still going to be fun watches? I don't know.
I think they might be, and I think that I'm not the biggest Avenger fan, but I've recently got the Disney Channel and I've been rewatching them. And if we could say any movies that exist at the moment that will be iconic, I mean, it's probably going to be them. Let's be honest, because they do have a story arc that people are going to follow. And even if like Marvel gets ridiculously different in the future, people will say, well, this is where it started, right? These were the origins of these films. You know,
Right.
You and I could have bought Marvel stock in the 90s.
We should have bought Marvel stock.
Yeah, for next to nothing, because it was a joke. Like, and if anyone's younger and doesn't remember the 90s or the 80s, they could not make a superhero movie outside of Superman and Tim Burton's Batman, but like generally they couldn't make Superman movies for love or money, like because they were considered a joke.
Yeah,
and people didn't take them seriously. Now, like they're very much taken seriously. It's like a big deal across all age groups, you know. So I got to give that to Marvel. They did elevate themselves into the future the way that I dreamed they would when I was younger, you know?
Yeah.
Because I did think one day they're gonna make these movies right. And they did, you know. And there's a few missteps along the way, but yeah, of all the movies, I think that those are probably the ones that will be remembered that way.
I think that's definitely a strong argument. I don't know if all of the movies will be looked upon fondly in the future. I'm looking at you, Iron Man, too. But I do think overall the series, you're making strong points that they will be. I mean, they'll probably still be making the movies 20 years from now anyway.
Of course
So
they
it's
will.
a moot point.
Unless money's not a thing anymore.
Yeah, and then it's just like, yeah, oh, you're only gonna pay us in peanuts and like literal peanuts. No, we're good. Yeah, well, this was fun. Let's say we try it again another time.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll broach maybe another series.
Yeah. If you've enjoyed watching this today and you want to see more, please click the links below. Go to Fresh as a Daisy Films, check out our short films and other projects, and stay tuned for more videos from Fresh as a Daisy Film Chats.
In the burning heart.